After the fall of Tula, many of the Toltecs moved south and settled in the Valley of Mexico, founding several towns near Lake Texcoco. Over the years, they were joined by even more waves of Chichimecs, migrating into the valley from the north. The last wave of Chichimecs to come into this mixing pot was the tribe we know today as the Aztecs. Today we know a lot about the Aztecs because they wrote about themselves in books called codices. A codex was filled with illustrations as well as these picture symbols that are a form of writing. Newer codices, written after the Spanish colonists came to Mexico, contain descriptions of typical Aztec life, as well as traditional stories about their ancestors and their gods. These stories are called myths or legends. One such story recounts the mythical origin of the Aztec people. According to the legend, the Aztecs came from a land to the north, where they lived in caves. They left this land to search for a new home in the south. They wandered for hundreds of years, accompanied on their journey by their god, Huitzilopochtli, whose name means hummingbird on the left. Despite his innocent name, Huitzilopochtli was a ferocious god of war. Huitzilopochtli told them to make their new home at the place where they saw this sign, an eagle eating the fruit of a cactus. In the Spanish version of the legend, the eagle is eating a snake, but to the Aztecs, the fruit of the cactus had symbolic meaning, for it represented the human heart. Finally, after centuries of wandering, they found the sign, and here they began to build a great city. The sign of Huitzilopochtli appeared in an unexpected place, on an island in Lake Texcoco. Much of the island was swampy and uninhabitable, but the Aztecs, obeying their fearsome god, began to live on the island. They founded not one, but two towns, Tlatelolco, and the city that was destined to become their capital, Tenochtitlan. To get to the mainland, they built elevated roads or causeways, with bridges that could be drawn up if enemies approached. They also created more usable land by building chinampas, which were rectangular artificial islands. Chinampas were built next to the causeways and were separated by canals. The people could plant their gardens on the chinampas, or they could live on them. Today, some of these chinampas still exist, surrounded, as then, by canals. The Aztecs heaped up mud and reeds from the lake and planted trees or pounded sticks into the mud to hold the soil in place. But even though the Aztecs were able to create chinampas and sustain themselves on their little island, they were surrounded by enemies. For Tenochtitlan was encircled by older cities around the lake, such as Culhuacan, Chalco, and Xochimilco. But the Aztecs were able to ally themselves with a very powerful city of Azcapotzalco and then Texcoco, and their power began to grow. For the Aztecs were skilled warriors. In brutal campaigns, they began to sweep across the Valley of Mexico. In the name of their terrible god of war, they struck terror throughout the land. Enemies captured in war were taken back to Tenochtitlan to be sacrificed on the altars of Huitzilopochtli, while survivors were forced to pay tribute to their new masters. Aztec codices record the amounts of tribute paid in a single year: warrior costumes, shields, and headdresses, quantities of cocoa and gold, thousands of cotton garments, and tons of food. Tribute streamed into the capital from the farthest domains as the Aztecs pushed across Mesoamerica. They created an empire that reached from the central highlands to the Gulf of Mexico. Gorged with tribute, the capital grew into a dazzling city of canals, gardens, and temples, the fabulous Tenochtitlan. When the Spanish conqueror, Hernán Cortés, arrived here in 1519, he was stunned by the beauty of the city. He described a clean and radiant metropolis of palaces and shining temples, perfectly laid out along broad paved boulevards. Heads of mythical beasts guarded the temple stairways, while carved serpents and other images decorated the streets. Cortés also spoke of the beautiful markets of Tlatelolco, where people might go to barter for weavings or pottery, or where the lady of the house might go to buy tortillas, tamales, salt. You could buy corn, nuts, peppers, ducks, or fish caught fresh from the lake. While merchants from faraway places like Oaxaca or Yucatan traded in gold and quetzal feathers. The people of noble blood and those warriors who had distinguished themselves most in battle were allowed by law to wear fine clothing in public, while the highest noble of all, the great king Moctezuma, was carried through the streets on a litter. But while the Spaniards were impressed by the magnificence of Tenochtitlan, they were not prepared for what they would find when they entered the temple district. They climbed the stairways of the great temples. They discovered to their horror that the steps were covered with blood, and inside the sanctuaries the odor of rotting blood overcame them. The Aztecs practiced human sacrifice almost continuously. The method was not complicated. The chest of the victim was quickly opened with a stone knife, and the still beating heart was removed. Blood was smeared across carved images of the gods, and then the heart was placed in a bowl and burned. By one estimate, the Aztecs sacrificed about 30,000 people every year. When a new temple to Huitzilopochtli was dedicated, some 20,000 people were killed in a span of 4 days. Near the center of the city, 135,000 skulls were displayed on a rack. The purpose of all this carnage was to feed the gods, for the gods were thought to be living beings that needed nourishment, blood and human heart, to survive. For example, sacrifice caused Tlaloc, the rain god, to send life-giving rain, and sacrifice caused the sun god, Tonatiuh, to rise each day and move through the heavens. Tonatiuh lies at the center of the famous Aztec calendar stone. On each side are claws holding human hearts. This circular band contains the names of the 20 days of the Aztec month, such as lizard, stone knife, eagle, and reed. At the top we see the date, 13 Reed, when the present sun was born, and inside 4 rectangles are the dates when the 4 previous suns were destroyed. The Aztecs believed that they were living under the 5th sun, which began during the time of Teotihuacan. They were constantly struggling through sacrifice to keep the 5th sun and the universe alive. The fall of the Aztec Empire was strangely foretold by one of their own legends. According to the legend, the god Quetzalcoatl, who had gone to live across the ocean, would return in the year 1 Reed to rule over the Aztecs. In one of the most extraordinary coincidences in all of human history, 1 Reed fell on the year 1519, precisely when Hernán Cortés landed in Mexico. Cortés, with his beard and white skin, looked like a god to the Aztecs. The king, Moctezuma, thinking Cortés might be a god, welcomed him into Tenochtitlan. But the Spaniards soon revealed why they had come, to convert the Indians to Christianity and to take their gold. Conflict was inevitable, and the outcome was never in doubt. The Aztec warriors fought bravely, but they were no match for Spanish armor and horses. And of course, the Spanish had guns. Taking stones from the Aztec temples, Cortés built a church. With this act, the new world was united with the old, and the final curtain came down on the 2,000-year history of the ancient Americans.